Hello everyone, and welcome back to the continued tutorial series on integrating .NET with SampleManager 11.0. Today's lesson is going to be part 2 of the code review, so without further ado, let me go ahead and get started. As you'll recall from the previous video, we added two references. One was to a local DLL by going to add a reference, and you can see that reference here. And the other one was a service reference, doing the same thing but picking service reference, and those are the two references that we have. But there's a little bit extra work we need to do to actually consume. Inside of your Visual Studio environment, if you click on Class View, you can see that DLL was added as a reference, the one that we added manually, not the service reference, but to the DLL. Go under there, look at the references, and you can see there's the name of the DLL. What we're actually looking to do is build a LIMS ML document. So we're going to be referencing this particular class to create a document. So one of the first things to do is go ahead and import the libraries for that helper DLL. So just double click anywhere on the form there, and that will open this up. So the first thing I do is add the references, the imports references. Because we're dealing with XML, I go ahead and add these three. This is just a habit of mine. When I'm dealing with XML, I add these three. Need to add any special or perform any special attention or do any special work for the service reference, because when you add the service reference, it adds everything that you need in order to consume that. So when the form creates, everything's an object. So I've got three objects here that I create. A couple for dealing with the dialog box for picking a file, and the other one, which is more important, is the reference, an object called m_lims ml doc. That is a reference to a document within the helper class provided by Thermo. So when the application first loads up, so under form load, we've got a couple of initialization items that we deal with. We create some objects for the file dialog, and then we set their initial directories to the application startup path, and there's a folder in there called LIMS ML examples. The LIMS ML examples is a folder that Thermo provides out of the box that has some sample LIMS ML files that can be used for testing. But the form has loaded. When someone clicks on the process button that's on that front page, it's going to go through three steps. Step one is going to open up the dialog box for you to pick an XML file to be processed. And the second step is going to add the authentication header using the DLL, helper DLL that we imported. And then we're going to submit our XML to the WCF service. So the first thing the user does is open up the dialog box and pick an XML file. So let's take a quick look at that. So the Open XML pops up the dialog box, putting a little filter in place so you only see XML files. And then after the user picks the file, I go ahead and create a file stream object and serialize that document and store the serialized version of the XML document into that object that we created that's called m_lims ml document. So at this point, all you have is the XML contents in that file stored inside of the LIMS ML document object. So to add the username and password in encrypted form, we call a method that's part of that document object or that class, and it's called add user login. It requires two strings, a username and a password, and it will return the encrypted form of those and add the header information to the XML. The second part here is because this add user login already performs the authentication, we go ahead and set this to false. The final step is to go ahead and submit the XML to the WCF service. So inside the do web service routine, the first thing, most important, is to create a object. The LIMS web service client object is part of the service reference that we added. So all we had to do is add this one line, and now we're ready to go. All we have to do at this point is just call the routine soap_client.process, pass it the serialized XML document, and the response will come back and be stored in this string. And don't forget to close your object and set it to nothing. Listening, stay tuned for the next video.